Okay, so it's not the right side.
There we go.
That's fine.
It's a little crooked, but it's fine.
We can move it. Does that seem right?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
It is running. Just FYI.
Okay.
Because I was setting it to start and it just wasn't starting.
Okay, so it'll just run and start in 8 minutes. Okay, so I just texted Joe. I put in.
True, but how did we set it up? Go back to it. I made little children do the chicken dance.
What? No, you look at the right feed. I would not even keep going.
Best Prout picture I've ever seen in my life. I mean, could you ask?
If my reading matches it, then I'll be perfect. Then I would have won the war. Yo, I thought trash was last day. Yeah. Like, we don't want to get there. Shit is fried. Start a fire, as you guys see.
Do you think that would happen?
No.
That'd be kind of cool, though.
Pyrotechnics, put out the up in the game. You know, that's what I suggested in my application, but
Pyrotechnics.
I feel like we're missing a piece. Okay. Yeah, more or less. I'm just looking for the power cords and stuff like that. Da-da-da-da.
We don't know. We don't know. That's the, I'm sorry. We
Thank
didn't
you.
do it. I apologize. We didn't do it.
So there's two that are on the exam, right?
Yeah.
On
Which mic is it?
No, so we started carrying all the wires and just the general, which is why I was getting confused.
I don't know. Can you get? Do you know anything about this?
No, I actually don't. Felicia did it all last time, so I don't know how to do any of this. But I would love to stand and watch, like, I don't
No,
know,
that's good.
can I
like a sun and law or something.
Send me
Way up.
So I knew with my guy Larry.
Yeah. He showed me some. Well, he was in one of Michelle's classes last night, and expressed an interest in like bringing connections to creative writers.
sounds like it's a good
What about me? Wait a second.
Hey, and then they can subscribe to my radio.
That's a good question, right? I've never seen that before.
Oh, not on stage. Okay, yeah, I was just gonna say that.
So it should be good.
All right, I'll remind you. Yeah. Honestly, that would like really make you less anxious.
You just have to make sure that they go to the and then I'll put the extra ones right here. Sure.
Very garage band.
What's up?
Very garage band.
Going.
Okay, hello folks. A couple announcements before our wonderful and great readers. Next week, so on the syllabus for Prout, it says an open mic, but because of the rescheduling with the snow a couple weeks ago, it will be an MFA reading with Felicia and Maddie. And I'm currently in the process of scheduling a totally optional open mic at the end of March at Novel Blends, the coffee shop and bookstore downtown. So I'll share that with you guys, and it'll be a BFA open mic. So that will take the place of the one that had to be rescheduled. Just a couple quick reminders. If you are an MFA creative writing major, you're expected to attend 8 of the Prout readings. Quick reminder, that breaks down to 3 MFA readings, 2 visiting writer readings, and 2 of the BFA, or 3, okay, you can do math, 3 of the BFA readings. So if for some reason you can't attend a Prout, I've been getting a lot of emails like, oh, I'm worried that I'm missing it. It's okay, you can miss them. Just make sure you're on track with those numbers. And if you're not, you can look at the makeup portfolio on Canvas and in the syllabus. If you're a minor, it's 6 of the Prout readings. That's 2 MFA readings, 2 visiting writers, and 2 BFA readings. So make sure you're on track for that. We have 2 more visiting writers coming up, and next week is our last MFA reading. Okay, so without further ado, I'm gonna invite Sam up to invite Sam up.
Can everyone hear me? Okay, great, because you're not going to want to miss this. When I first met Sam, I asked him kindly not to murder me, and then I gave him the keys to my apartment. He was a new MFA that I let sleep on my couch for a few days before he moved here, and it was simultaneously insane, but also one of the best decisions I've made that summer, as it was how I grew to know him as a person and a poet. Sam's work is wildly generous in its interpretation of the world through precise natural imagery that engages with genuine curiosity. Sam reframes the meaning of home and its fluidity, as well as how our relationships shape us. He creates microcosms out of the most ordinary images, reworking common metaphors to revive their meanings. I am constantly struck by the sharp reticence he demonstrates in his writing process, and I'm always moved by the consideration he places into others' works. Above all, I think Sam's work is tender at heart, and this is how he manages to create the most authentic sense of intimacy between writer and reader. Sam says it best in his own poems. As readers, his work shows us what love demands of gentle hands. A little more about him. He describes himself as a Sagittarius in the stars, but an Aquarius in the bars. It's up to you to figure out what that means. I don't think I want to know. He is an October man at heart. He grew up in Grinnell, Iowa, and attended Grinnell College, moving to Ohio last fall. He paints, carves spoons, hikes, and spends his free time yearning for his parents' dog, Beans. He's published work in the Journal, Salt Hill, our poetry magazine, and others, and there's many more to come. I just know it. Finally, Lucille Clifton wrote of how the truth is furiously knocking at our doors. I love how Sam's work is always willing to answer this call and this hunger for knowledge. I love having his presence here in Ohio, and I'm grateful for him. He is the best Sam I know, so please give him a warm welcome.
Wow, okay, I can't top that. That was really beautiful, Sam, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm Sam. I'm gonna read some poems. My symptoms include dry mouth and a racing heart and a keen sense of dread. But that's the usual stuff, so let's just dig in. I wanted to start off with a really super unfinished poem, and it's called One Night.
These days, I beg the sun to drop, to disappear into a love our bodies only know, to hide with you in sound, in scent, in leaves and the hardwood musk of an old home steeped in midsummer. Every day without us knowing, the earth takes of our story, whispering it back to us through chipped windows and memories of wind. Listen as our laughter dances between restless branches, as the hemlocks negotiate shadow, dropping a last light and brushing it from our bedside wall. Can you hear it in the darkness too, our story, our spark in a month of sun, our torn petal in a mouth of blossom? I gather it, and I tell it for no reason but the communion of things. For the stolen summer I lapped from your shoulder, and for the dreams that hang in the dusty iron scent of an open bedroom window. Mercy lives in the sweat, stitching one limb to another's. We cling to the other, you, me, because that close we can no longer see a forever. Nor a past, only each breath, each tooth, each rasp of the sheets as the ends of ourselves press, safe against cotton. Tonight, the dream whose grip I curl myself into is your arms, your body, the familiar knock of our separate flesh holding me half awake, while my sleeping half dips into perfection, that place between what we are and what we love. Teach me to say it, love, and I will learn a way to tell you how I carry your salt on my tongue each day, how you quicken the food that meets this mouth, these lips that bear the electric weight of your teeth, your hunger, how I taste your tears in moonlight, your breath on a bat's wing. Your sweat is feedback, your mouth, song. In another dream, I wake alone. To the door I face in sleep, opening and swinging on its hinge like a beckoning finger. I rise and grip the wood that was gripped 1,000 times by hands once mine, that belong now to arms of a past life, a lonelier life pushing as I pull the prescient door closed as if through sand. And when I fall awake into our room, I feel it fill for a moment with the same grasp, like an invisible hourglass, and watch a crumpled sheet press a scar into your chest and cheek. Do not be sad when you wake in the ghost grip of a past love. You cannot be blamed for the stories your body holds fast to. You spend days in the prolonged flinch that memory makes of pain, of what passed between your body into a past you hardly speak of. But pain speaks without tense. You still feel your ghost, that story of yourself, when sharp angles of sun divide the floor or soaked hands scrape the scent of sandalwood against your present. And you feel for a moment indistinguishable from the version of you whose hurt transcended history. But here beside you now, I pin you to our present. I coax your eyes closed and press my chest to yours until our breath slows to match, yours rising into the gap that mine, falling, leaves for you. Go back to sleep. Close your eyes as I rise and sort the rumpled shadows on the floor, clothes still full with the scent of you, records of our night's hurried undressing, our moment out of the sun, out of sight, out of memory. With one palm on the wall, feeling evening's cool respite, the others warming open on each other's skin as breath began to burst from us. Help me find the words for the place beyond what we've lived through and what we become. For the silence that plunges between us when the sun leaves our walls and stars salt the sky and our bodies agree there need be nothing but one bed, one night, this summer, this sweat. I thought it'd be fun to read some older work stuff, some pre-MFA stuff. So I brought a few poems from undergrad and also from the time just after undergrad while I was just kind of figuring out where I wanted to be, what I wanted to do and that sort of stuff. This is called Hummingbird, and I wrote it in a wine bar in Mount Vernon, Iowa. The counter filled with regulars, I tip silently over its edge. A cork chirps in the bartender's palm as she unpierces its screw. Squeak of wood against metal, of hand held to animal. Sound of my father cupping the cat-bloodied hummingbird through our back lawn as its wings beat his hands like a heart. And this one's super close to my heart because it's the last poem that I ever wrote for undergrad. And fittingly, it's about how like the times you spend in certain places with certain people like intermingle in memory, and those like people and those places, the sensory information that they carry when they're separated still brings you back to when those were together. And it's called Kiss. Split wood air bled stately in the cypress grove. A wet bite of humid wind in the cool. Electric as afterthought, your teeth valleyed my bottom lip like a dull knife in tomato skin. That deep blue evening, hazy behind a yellow lamp. The same shadow of a stadium stair sky, now as months ago, our tongues soaked in pre-rain, the smell of wet brick like hail, but softer than the taste of wind on your lips, softer than branches lapping absent-mindedly in our hair-tug sway, your teeth pressed like lamplight. I think dating apps are really funny. I like, not just because somebody thought like, let's take OkCupid and, you know, combine it with Candy Crush and make it the most popular way to meet another person now, which is nuts. Also, it's just like trying to create a bio for yourself and trying to like sum yourself up in just a few sentences is such a strange exercise and leads to some like truly deranged things that you see swiping through that. So anyway, this is a poem called Tinder Bio. I'm at my most human when I gulp cold water from cupped hands. Do you pay for parking or do you risk it? I'm a creature of habit. If I were to shoplift at Target, it would be boxer briefs off the clearance rack. My favorite things about summer are empty bars, my corner shop's beer cooler, and how lindens thicken June air into hot floral jam. The whole town suspended beneath a single noon bell. And back to last semester stuff. This one's called Between Us. Today, I slip across the sheer glass of a hopeless wish. At the window, looking without seeing, I let ink pour from my fingers, my hand scraping light from the page, revising the earth that separates us. I dim the sky and hang a thin moon there, where branches knock preoccupied knuckles against the glass. I touch glass and touch something between us. I would give you every one of my days if I could, fold a map and tip the black swamp into the Atlantic. I would gild Manhattan with an Ohio autumn and stuff its gutters with maple leaves and buckeyes. But this evening, everything behaves as expected. The trees continue their tree work. A scrap of apple skin steeps my mouth in an idle bitterness. And behind glass, I write every word for you, staring east until this day and each day beyond it can fit between your hands. You who watch the same moon materialize from the top of your high-rise, who slipped from our bed, our kitchen, our avenue, dragging my eyes the whole way after you. I darken the sky again, your face and the moon brightening with each deeper shade. And I see you there, clearly now, as this window and the day behind it blacken quietly on the page folding closed in my hand. Last November, I kind of had to like last minute go back to Iowa for a funeral, and my car was kind of on the fritz, so I had to take the train, which I'd never done before. But all of those experiences led to a lot of train poems, which you're going to see, as well as just a lot of kind of thoughts around the process of burial and mourning. This one began as a sonnet that I wrote on the way between Iowa and Union Station in Chicago, the first leg back from Iowa on Amtrak. And it very quickly became clear that this was not destined for sonnetness. And in Union Station, I revised it into something a little bit more open, but I think that there's still some of the vestiges of repeated sound and rhythm that still hanging on here to this particular draft. It's called Closing My Eyes at a Burial. Children hang shrill questions in the air while the others kneel to pray. Wind tugs at my pant leg as if in need. I give it what warmth I have to spare and remember a joke my mother told earlier on this loose-ankled polyester formality. A flapping sound, flagpole shins, cold and stainless. November now, an October death. The months measure our restlessness. I'm surrounded by sounds the body can hold only for so long, with a choke in mine. Our small breaths embrace in the breeze. Leaves, maple, and sycamore whisper at our feet. Treetops catch, set rain gently down to stone. Rain always finds where rain belongs. I open my eyes, a flag unwinds, and a bugle fades to birdsong. How are we doing on time? I forgot to set a timer. Okay. This is the first prose poem I ever wrote. It's something I've been doing lately. I don't know if it'll sound different from my lineated poems, but yeah, I guess we'll see. It's about a place I used to go with my family every summer when I was a kid. And the memories are still definitely as fresh today, even though they were decades ago, as they were just afterward. It's called Pine Lake State Park. A box of rattling fragments thuds onto my desk. Shelves and office walls echoing empty. I choose a space for the clamshell first, its domed lid rocking slow, settling into place. River sanded, thumb polished, its inner curve shines slick, fingers hooked beneath a cheek. The same mud each summer spilled between my toes, turkey vultures accumulating above the walnut stippled shore. In sandals and swim trunks, maybe half this height, waist deep in the belly of the Iowa River, I unmet the shell's lips to a treasureless slump of flesh. Dusk deepened in the water. The whip of fed fires cracked at the air. I dried on the cabin's lawn atop plush scars of molehills, my scalp full of sand, watching sunset puddle in the shell's bowl. Sick for home each night, mice snapping behind the couch. I spent each dawn glad for the cold, shivering in my brother's sweater as water cleared its throat against the side of our boat. Fleeing geese shrieked and drummed at the torn tissue sky, brightening, bittersweet, a thimble of marmalade spilling through timber onto my throat. We always left too soon, half-tanned, hungry, a bright fruit, sugar smoke hunger, lodging promises in mud. I pry apart the window and soften with autumn. The oily scent of lit charcoal, a V-shaped chorus overhead. I set the clamshell rocking again, brushing it as I prop postcards and landscapes against the wall. Clumsy carvings of rats, fish, and birds on the edge of the shelf, littered with the meantime, the life built around it. This is a poem called When We're Speaking Again, and I wrote it about somebody who I was on really, really bad terms with, but who I'd once been really close to. But these days, we're back on super good terms, so all happy endings here. When We're Speaking Again. I'll tell you about the kitchen window, the animal dramas and backyard minutiae, how grackles hold court in a copse of dogwood to condemn an intrepid cat, sprinting for the porch each day, her hackles up for hours. I'll tell you how the clouds swelled, shaming the birds to silence. I'll apologize and mean it. I'll tell you about the double batches of crepes, why I eat the first half with lemon and sugar while the other piles up. Today, like our best days past, the kitchen thick with browning butter, and the quiet language of a shared life. Citrus humming in the fingers, lifting hair from my eyes, as clouds unwound down a crowded sky, fast as smoke, heavy drops shattering against the glass. October. The sun rears, piercing the lawn with a green, glistening spear. At its mercy, I step into the day, a dozen crows plummeting from their perch, the silver maple, always first to undress as it takes its time to die. Leaves purr along the gutter like sharpened blades against thumb tips as I make my catalog of steel. Stiff hands poring over the cluttered workbench, bark-skinned, dry ribbons unspooling down my knuckles where the spindle sander tugged a layer from them. The wood shop drenched in dust, leather and split wood. That smell, that forever fall, a vivid red across my hands. The basswood cardinal. Wrapped in 6 layers of plastic and a hometown sweatshirt for good measure, the cardinal took the Amtrak from Ankeny to my office window with 92 scrawled under its driftwood stand in my dad's precise yet jagged hand. And not his only carved gift. After decades of Mother's Days, these shelves grew too full to treasure. The hunter brought home more painted wood than fowl. Pintails, loons, that one-off pelican. But I'd heard the cardinal was Grandma's favorite bird, above the rustle of her home's dismantling. The living room sanded down, sanitized for staging, as cousins and grandkids bagged up memories, erasing their shadows from clean white walls. I took the cardinal. The dawn shriek burned through snow cardinal. The front yard nest egg on the ground cardinal. When I was 8, with child's hands, I knew where eggs belonged, and for the nest whose freckled pearls I borrowed, tested against my thumbnail, and returned, condemned by human touch. Human hands tugged me from the lawn, my wrist fast in the grip of grandmotherly fury. I cried, because what else can you do when you learn your hands move more cruelly than your mind? That you're tied to gifts of unmaking, and that the same hands to trace a Dremel softly down a wooden shoulder could tear mine from its socket the next time I talk back, or ditch me back there in Ankeny for another weekend, where I knew I'd woven distrust's dry and empty nest around the heartwood of a grandmother's love. But this love, as kind, as forgetful as death, leaves grudges only in the shade of keepsakes. Here on the sill, proud against a fading sun, sits all I kept from that place. I never saw her die, nor her dying, just her jaundiced turn of cheek as she stared out the window of my last visit, at the feeder hanging from its hook, clear as an IV bag, at the faithless birds who may have come that day, but never after. Lighting a bonfire after casting the ashes. Cold air sucks the meat from our knuckles, and threads of sparks spit above the backyard of our parents' home, where a flag thumps against wind sound. Grief, terminal, is contagious. I cry beside family and nothing tastes clean. The fire takes of our breath, full soft, with its bare palms hot across our faces, while the night begins its rites, clawing dry leaves from the mud. We, and all the earth's hands, are restless. The dead, less so. They pass with the breeze through our fingers as if knowing where they are bound. The heroes of our time have already moved to the cities they'll die in. Before parting, we make promises, extending ourselves towards something as endless as the way we love, are loved, us travelers through the loose grip of future tense. I have one more poem before I hand things over to Yassay. But thank you all for coming tonight. It means a lot that you're here to support the program and the Prout reading series and everything. So yeah, thank you for being here. This one's addressed to my dad, and it's called Hunter's Moon. Silent at your side, I've soaked my boots in untamed pastures, as the moon paled and distant turkeys stoked the croaking fires of morning. I've seen your hands go glossy as candy apples above pails of bloody feathers, felt the firmness of a banded leg, the potential dying in its spur. I've watched geese char against a molten sky, heard the beads of a shotgun pluck at water's skin, muffled by the camouflaged arm you wrapped over my face when the shot rang from the invisible end of the marsh. Your jacket smelled like moss, like dust and blood, warm as the sunset prying open the crook of your elbow. Now, I wonder, when the earth dims and the sky soaks up its color, would I hear the same music in the unfolding and refolding of the day, had I never learned, had you never taught me what love demands of gentle hands? Thank you.
Great. Hey, everybody. My name is Molly, and I'm lucky enough to be able to introduce our next reader, Yassay, who is a first-year fiction MFA, for anyone who doesn't know. So Yassay very quickly became not only one of my most trusted readers, writers, and brainstormers in the program, but also a dear lifelong friend. And my personal admiration for him aside, anyone who spent more than 2 minutes with this man knows that he's one of the most dynamic, determined, stubborn, but also passionate and well-read humans that you've ever met. And his work clearly reflects that. He has a special talent for conjuring vivid imagery, tender relationships, and complex social and cultural dynamics in his work. His current novel in progress explores the political repression and violence that took place in Cameroon in the 1960s. And clearly this project is a massive undertaking, but with his nearly 20 years of military service, deeply held personal convictions, and nuanced intercultural and linguistic knowledge, Yassay is uniquely positioned to be up to the task. His work has been published in Brittle Paper, the Fitchburg Sentinel, Hot Gem, Route 2, and Malarkey Books. As you'll witness today from hearing his creative nonfiction, fiction, and poetry, he is multi-talented in all genres, and he's a fellow writer who I'm in awe of every single day. Please join me in welcoming Yassay.
How are you guys doing today? All right. My first story is dedicated to Carol Louise Diallo, and she's a 5-year-old girl who was shot by gendarmes in Cameroon. So I thought about her death and I came up with a story to, remember her. Slumber disowned Ibanda every time he could see the moon from the window of his jail cell, a silver fire in the purple and black of the Boya mountain sky. The noctilucent clouds tinged with brightness as they passed above told him stories of himself, the ones he didn't understand why he lived in. But sometimes the clouds told him of things to come. Sitting on the floor in his red Nike shorts, his arms on bent knees, and rocking to the cadence of his visions was his sole invocation. Glimpses of the future reached him, defying the jail's steel bars. Our resident prophet, most of the gendarmes walking by would say, sometimes poking Ibanda with their batons. They were usually drunk. The ones on duty were drinking, and the ones coming to replace them were drunk as well. At shift change, they would trade stories of the night of women they were coming or going from. Then they exchanged whistles and guns, signed logs, and said goodbye. Ibanda ignored their taunts and tales, listening to the light in the sky. It had answers. 6 months before, Ibanda was put in solitary confinement. a former toilet in the basement of the Gendarmerie in Boya. It smelled like it looked, a concrete square filled with shit. There, the gendarmes shoved Ebanda a day after arresting him for publishing a polemic poem about Cameroon's corruption titled Bia Chop Broke Pot. Ebanda's incarceration evolved to feculence after he punched a fellow prisoner who grabbed his buttocks and requested a tribute. I'm a tribute to myself, Ebanda had cried, striking the man. The gendarmes broke up the fight. Then they punched and kicked Ebanda, whipping him with belt buckles, striking him with batons, shoving him in the shithole of the building. They shouldn't have, because that was the night Ebanda first heard with new eyes the cry of the moving sky. But he also heard with new ears. This one, he thinks he's too good to give bribe, when the gendarmes said when they came to release him into the general prison population the next day. Every man pays tribute, you hear me? Taxi drivers, they pay us bribes, so we pay the commissioner. Do you understand? Another said, hot breath in Ebanda's face, pointing a crooked finger with no nail. It is the way of the world, the former said, even for white man country, only with plenty lawyer them. So get with the program or live in shit, said the other. Ebanda ignored them because of what he'd seen the night before, just as the moon came around the Boya mountain. It was his first vision. It was a juju dancing on the parade field. His human feet had ankle bells and rattlers. His body was made of nut brown rattling spines, and his carved bull head turned around on a bejeweled long neck. It danced like an aggrieved tempest, turning this way, then that, running, stopping, stumping, then taking off again. A crowd limped the gendarme to the juju's gyrations, but when the little girl with a bullet-shattered skull descended from the clouds in the middle of the field, the dancing terror wailed everything to tears. Dogs, cats, goats, children, mothers and fathers. A great cry was heard in Boya. In his silence, Ebanda knew he'd seen around the curve of time. That's why he kept looking out of his window with teary eyes, trying to see the future of his wretched nation. This is a work in progress for my novel. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, and it's like a backstory to the project I'm working on. I decided to play with the characters and extend their lifespan in a way. So here we go with this. For most of 1944, Makuba boiled her unborn child in the rage of her pregnancy while tilling the slopes of Mount Coupe, just above the village of Nyasoso. In doing so, she exchanged the essence of grudges with it, as well as everything she ate, drank, heard, touched, and thought. The boiling began from the time her stomach was flat till it bulged and was divided by a dark vertical line down to her navel, the smear of fire against her earth-brown skin. The tilling began after her husband, Nzume, left in a tirailleur's uniform with a rifle and a coupe before Makuba realized she was pregnant. To calm her nerves, she put on a kaba, a stained boonie hat, Batula Chang shoes, and went to her farm, ignoring anyone who greeted her. She wasn't a morning person. She wasn't an afternoon or evening person either. In that moment of her life, Makuba was simply a coiled woman ready to speak acid or raise knuckles. She hated that her husband was a conscript with the French colonial army fighting the madman of Germany. She also missed her mother of mothers, the Douala Sea. It was different with her first pregnancy. Ehaba was the first one who came. For one, Nzume was always by her side and all she wanted soya. This pregnancy made her want roasted plantains, sour plums drizzled with palm oil, sprinkled with salt. Sometimes she craved Beaufort, a lager beer everyone swore was good for pregnant women. But in between the satisfaction of her cravings were her simmering tears and the black soil of the Coupe Mountain. On the last day of her pregnancy, Makuba worked harder than usual under an undecisive sun that punished, soothed, and beamed through the many fruit trees, bushes, and shrubs that filled her plot with bark and verdant harmony. The earth yielded to her fingers too, giving her hands yams for her conical basket, and the mountain whispered to her boiling child. Makuba ignored everything she saw. The spotted blue hues that landed next to her tilling hoe, and the curious Gabon woodpecker that darted to the nearby sapele tree, red-crowned, green-winged, with a spotted yellow underbelly. She scoffed at them. Life was not sweet. She felt Nzume had abandoned her in hostility. Her brother-in-law, James, had taken the checking on her in odd hours when most people were lowering the wicks in their bush lamps. Makuba thought he looked at her with an expectation of sudden estrus. She started to resent her oldest son as well, a habit, for following his uncle around. What a stupid little boy, Makuba thought. Ashamed of her resentment, her hands worked fast, building ridges, chopping down plantains, replanting tubers, and the sizzle to her spirit returned. After she pulled weeds from the ridges, she stuck her hoe and machete in a basket filled with yams and plantains. Then she stooped, leaned her back into the basket, put the strap that looped around it to her forehead, and rose. A bright pain mauled her. Why do me like this? Makuba said, dropping her load. Right here? A hooting answered somewhere in the forest. Then a murmuration of feathered flames spiraled from one of the surrounding trees. Makuba wished the birds were like the ones in the story she'd heard as a girl, the one about Bakassi hunters and the birds they employed to carry messages. There was Sumbela, the great owl who taught the eagle. There was Sumbela, the great owl who taught the eagle how to become the king of the sky. There was also the elusive Mount Coupe bush shrike, the only bird known to have sung to the souls in the cradle of the Coupe. These birds Makuba wished for, plumage messengers, to carry news of her agony that was life's perpetuation. Not here, Makuba cried, while the baby did flips in her belly, trying to decide if it should jump into the world or dive into it. As she sat down beneath the guava tree, big beads of sweat rolled down her forehead, taking with them a drunk mosquito. Someone help, Makuba called out into the sacred silence of the Mount Coupe, knowing no one would respond. She did not get along with her sister-in-laws, women who were supposed to be like sisters to her. Even worse was that these women who hated each other hated her more. She also had no friends, and the betrayal of her firstborn lingered. That's why Makuba chided her unborn child for not waiting till she got home. Why are you impatient? She asked, rubbing her belly. Why can't you wait? The unborn tempest calmed, and Makuba bit her lips and grunted, grabbing a low-hanging branch to stand. But she felt a warm gush between her legs and smelled honeycombs. Knowing the baby had refused to wait, she squatted and prepared to give birth. Just so you know, Makuba said to the baby, if I die, you die. The baby heard the mother's warning and started its dive into the world at war. A storm gathered at the mountain's peak to welcome it. The last time Makuba was in labor, a three-toothed doula with 7.5 fingers was by her bedside, prepared for Ahaba's breached birth. The doula's apprentices had hot water, clean towels, sterile razors, alcohol, and baby napkins. There were sunflowers and green wine bottles on the nightstand, a baby blue basket waiting to give a first bath, and Makuba sat on the timber bed Nzume had built, her back supported by rosy pillows. The room smelled like the earth floor, burning sage, baby powder, Vaseline, cod liver oil, and the doula's smoking pipe. Nzume encouraged from behind the door. You are wonderful, her husband said as Makuba wailed and screamed. But it was Mama Minone, the snaggle-toothed doula, who was wonderful because she kept mother and child alive despite the latter's cursed positioning. How Makuba longed for the dead doula now. Screaming, she reached down and was relieved to find hair on the crown of the head that was pushing through her into the world. At least it wasn't like its brother, Makuba thought between gaps, then felt ashamed again. The sun finally yielded to rolling clouds which bustled up the mountain and released giant drops of rain and with milk white hail. A baby was born after lightning tore through the ether before mystic claps of thunder. Under the seizing rain, Makuba rinsed her son in the trickle of the guava tree that sheltered her. Then she clamped his cord with a thin strip she'd ripped from her kaba, wrapped the wriggling plump in an even larger piece, and held him to her nipple. He was a silent earth-brown baby with silver slivers in each of his big black blinking eyes. After the baby finished his first meal, Makuba placed him in a cradle of dried plantain leaves. Then she placed the cradle and the baby in her basket, covered it with fresh plantain leaves, mounted the basket to her bass, and returned to town as blood trickled from her legs. My third piece is a poem, and it's called Adim. Backstory: I was deployed to Iraq twice and Afghanistan once, and I'm a proud African. I'm proud African, and we have a different cosmology. And my father blessed me with an oil that his father had blessed him. So I wrote a poem, to remember this oil that was rubbed on me before I went to war. And it's called Edim, which is the name of the poem as well. The oil my father gave me on my way to Iraq was the oil his father gave him before he walked from Lagos to Liberia on his way to America. He called it a demon. He said it will make me impervious, that bullets won't go through me, that machetes would bounce off my body. A deem is a deem. A deem is how the Bakassi waged war. The legend began when the Bakassi began, when time began in the era of Leviathans and primordiality. And the power of a deem was there, in the souls of the unborn, in the blood of the living, in the bones of the dead, high up in the Kupe and the Mwaniguba mountains. And my ancestors, they bathed in a deem, and their muscles glistened, and machetes bounced off their bodies because they were impervious like my father said I would be. My father said this to me. He said, son, when you fall into Tigris, a deem will not let you drown. And when you are on fire in Baghdad, a deem will not let you burn. And when all bets are off, yell, Abem Minyame, Ninsungume, ancestors save me. And all the mothers and fathers it took to make you will rescue you. That's why I'm here with you today. I rubbed the sweet oil on my head, on my chest, everywhere else, and I stood in the fires of ancient Sumeria. I sailed the Tigris and Euphrates. I did not drown or burn. And when all bets are off, I stood, I fought, and bullets bounced off my bodies because I was embrocated in a deem, impervious like my father said I would be. A deem is a deem. A deem is how I wage war. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here first. Thank you.